Where would you like me? Raymond in the middle. Jesus. Never heard so much.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. ¿Qué tal? Bienvenidos. Aquellos que todavía estén viendo el Atlético contra el Real Madrid, ya, se acabó, va a empezar el MasterClass. Pero me avisan cómo quedaron, por favor. Así que tenemos, como ya se está convirtiendo en tradición aquí en la Universidad de la Libertad, el enorme privilegio de contar con dos auténticas personalidades. Primero, el empresario Todd Morley, el entrepreneur Todd Morley, que estuvo con nosotros el año pasado en un maravilloso diálogo con Ricardo Salinas Pliego, y que se ha convertido en un gran fan de la Universidad de la Libertad, particularmente de la comunidad académica y de todos ustedes, chicos, que están estudiando aquí. Y otra persona que también se ha convertido en un personaje cercano a la casa, Elena Panaritis, es una experta en materia de derechos de propiedad, es también economista, empresaria, fue arquitecta, una todóloga que siempre nos ilustra con nuevas ideas y nuevos grandes pensamientos. El formato es un masterclass que nos va a compartir el señor Morley, Todd Morley, sobre los conceptos de Deep Tech, Global Trade y Global Finance, que básicamente es un título pues, muy a todo dar, pero que le permite hablar de lo que él quiera, ¿no? Y yo creo que lo bonito es que les comparta algunas de las experiencias que van a escuchar de su parte a partir de las preguntas que le vamos a estar haciendo Elena y yo. Después, con todo gusto, vamos a abrir un espacio. Esto va a ser como algunos 25 o 30 minutos y después abriremos un espacio para comentarios, preguntas, respuestas, diálogo. Así que, pues antes que nada y antes de arrancar, un aplauso de bienvenida para Todd y para Elena.
If I may add one thing there, global
course.
infrastructure, because that's the big tech angle too, right? Energy and other things we've talked about.
We will.
Because I think they'll find that very interesting.
We will. A couple of hours ago, we recorded a video cast for Universidad de la Libertad and Inconformes, and we talked about, Todd, what's your vision? What is an entrepreneur? All these kids here are thirsty to become entrepreneurs and to know what it takes to be an entrepreneur, and this is why they've chosen Universidad de la Libertad, What are the elements that goes into the mindset of an entrepreneur, and what should they be thinking about?
No quick answer on that. I think it helps to be ADHD a little bit. You get to see things in motion. I get a lot of heads nodding. Because you see things creatively, you see things for what they could be or should be instead of what it's served up to you as. We said this before with bureaucracy. It doesn't make sense to an entrepreneur to see all of this chaos. And so I've always thought that an entrepreneur figures out legally how to go from A to B in the straightest line possible and stop worrying about all the other stuff. And sometimes it's just that nobody asks, why is it done that way? And you know, if you go into certain areas, that we did something in the Hollywood, Guggenheim, my former company, still does. And I literally knew very little about that industry, so I kept asking dumb questions. But the people who are in the industry don't ask the dumb questions because it's just taken for granted. And then suddenly, occasionally, the dumb question actually is the thing that changes the whole paradigm, right? It's like, why do we do it that way? I don't know. It's just done that way here in Mexico. Like, can we change it? Guess so. Maybe not, you know, but that's what an entrepreneur does. Endless curiosity, I think, is a big part of being an entrepreneur. Endless curiosity, endless reading. You have a phenomenal school here because it's one of the few that's actually teaching you truth and teaching you real craft for the next world. And it's moving so quickly. You can imagine the curriculum here, if it were here 10 years ago, there was no such thing as AI. AI actually was a term used in the 1950s, just for a little context, but it's actually here now. You can start to feel it, right? So I love the university. I love what you're teaching. I love the collaboration between the professors and you. I can see the team spirit out in the hallways. I think that's phenomenal because sort of gang tackling a problem will have probably better results than just puzzling it on your own. But entrepreneurs to me are the highest in the food chain in terms of the business world. And so, you know, I'm talking my own position in Wall Street terms, but I really do believe that. And you need to be, in our discussion with Roberto, I said that a real estate developer is one of the top of that pyramid because you have to know so much. You have to source, you have to understand architecture, political trends, permitting, design, economics, finance. You have to be a master at all of them. And it's really very complex thing, but to real estate developers, it's the most natural thing. All right, we talk about risk. My mother would have said it's risky to drop out of college and start a company, which is what I did. And I thought it would be risky to work at Citibank because I might end up stuck some department that I hated, right? So risk is relative, and you know. So anyway,
Tremendous. Elena?
Well, I will second the extraordinary point you made, which is have endless questions and keep on being curious. And I will add to that, which is also said by Todd, but I'm going to say it in a different way. So there are three things I think that are important. One is if you don't feel that you fit in what already exists, then you're, by definition, you have an entrepreneurial streak. If you constantly ask the status quo, then you do have an entrepreneurial streak. But what really makes a successful entrepreneur versus a non-successful entrepreneur is discipline and persistence. So to be ADHD, it's very, very important, but it's not becoming. It's not gonna be what is gonna make you make it or break it. It's gonna be a definitely important input, questioning as well. But man, do you really need to, you don't have to wake up at 6 in the morning to go to work because you're not working for the public sector or a regular company, but you do have to wake up at 6 in the morning to have a disciplined process by which you need to prove to yourselves and to whoever else that what you're producing or what you have decided to be responsive to produce, to create, it's going to happen. And as we all know, 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs do not make it.
I don't know if that's true.
Well, sometimes
That's probably
the
Or they go
historically
back to
true.
the drawing board.
They go,
They
I think they
yeah,
go back
yeah.
to the drawing board.
But-
I don't think they just sort of fail out of entrepreneurial
No,
university. They
the-
just
on this
go back
spec-
to the drawing board.
Correct. So on this, so let's say you have an idea and you will not make it. That doesn't mean that you should just you should just let go, but you should have that discipline, that internal discipline of getting back up in the morning and you learn from whatever didn't work out. You keep asking questions to yourself. Now, why didn't that work? And what I was saying earlier with the conversation we had with Roberto and Todd, what is extraordinary that you guys have, I didn't have that. I don't know if you did, Todd, I have no idea, but you guys are among others of the same kind. And what is extraordinary is that you are among and you're an asset to each other. So you have to learn from each other by listening to each other and asking questions. And there is nothing wrong to fail, but you just need to go back on again.
Yeah, I mean, the king of entrepreneurs is Elon, right? And so when he started blowing up the Starship, he goes, yeah, that was great. We really learned a lot. Can you imagine if NASA did that? They would hire McKinsey, they would have a 10-year study, they wouldn't fire another rocket, they get thrown out
And
of
they
the
wouldn't do
budget.
anything.
Right, and Elon's like, yeah, they're like 10 or 15 million per, and so on the next one, it's gonna crash too. But on that one, we're really gonna learn. And then finally, by the third one, they got it out, you know, but that's how an entrepreneur thinks. It doesn't just quit.
In Spanish, we have a word for that type of mentality, which is the title of our video cast, of our podcast, inconformes, that failure to give up and no, I'm not complacent and I will not conform even with failure, or sometimes even celebrate failure because of the trial and error that goes with it. Now, you mentioned technology and the impact of technology, and I know that you think that artificial intelligence is, of course, the #1 breakthrough in technology. But you also just reminded me about global infrastructure and the technological opportunities, the technological developments that are there for innovation and new entrepreneurial opportunities. Can you expand a little bit about this?
I think it's also very useful to think, and for about the last 10 or 12 years, I've tried to submit my own thinking to this, and that is, what is technology doing to your business? And if you can't define it, you're going out of business. You didn't look at it the right way. And so technology is coming, it's everywhere, it's coming faster. And so will technology help your business? We were talking about farming earlier. I believe that actually technology, AI, will help the farming business. It'll make it more productive. It'll make it less polluting using bad practices. It'll figure that out. If you don't play with Grok or ChatGPT now, you ought to. I'd love to, and I love arguing. Grok 3 is Elon's, yeah, and it has less left bias, let's say. But it's fun to argue with it because you can stump it too. Like, no, I want you to think harder. Go back to the drawing board. And, oh, on that basis, because it's self-teaching. So you really need to think, what is tech doing to my business? And if you don't have an answer, it's not good. It's coming very quickly. My ex-partner just made an announcement with Palantir and with XAI about meaning a new joint venture to analyze financial services companies. So if you look at the insurance industry, it's a $50+ trillion industry. It's all run on paper. It's not even digitized, let alone AI. Like, it's crazy. And there are going to be winners and losers. So you better know what that is. I think as it relates to infrastructure, so many global problems can go away with better understanding of infrastructure. We talked earlier about, there's something like 800 million people in the world who don't have fresh drinking water. You can fix that very quickly if there's political will and you have enough power, right? Because there's salt water, you can desalinize it. May not be the best water you've ever had, but you can do other things with that. You can't store electricity in battery so well, but you can store water very well, right? And so there are ways to do this, and cheaper energy is coming. Coal, all the traditional sources of energy will be eclipsed. I believe that you'll see forms of energy that you wouldn't even think of right this minute that are not harmful, like hydrogen, for instance, and where the feedstock is water. So everybody's known that, but the power to separate H2 from O is way too expensive, but right around the bend, we believe that you're going to see some big changes there.
Wow.
So therefore, yeah, it'd be nice to own that unicorn, but I actually don't think that way. I think owning the unicorn is sort of like chasing butterflies. Maybe you were there and you got a few shares in the unicorn, but what you can do is take the unicorn and go out and fix problems in, say, Africa and create clean drinking water, right? Because now we know that unicorn has cheaper fuel coming from hydrogen.
So we've talked here at the university a great deal about decentralized technologies, and one in particular, since there's such an obsession with the role of money in society, is Bitcoin, and the ability of Bitcoin to protect your asset, which at the end of the day is your work, right? Your blood, sweat, and tears. And it's yours, it's your property right, and this way you protect it from the possibility of some know-it-all government official to say that it needs to be taxed at this amount, or that now we're going to expropriate it in the name of national sovereignty or whatever. What type of, what do you think of such decentralized technologies, and what type of roadheads do you see ahead? I want to link that also to whether decentralized technologies can help us in securing property rights. But
100%. So I think Bitcoin might be through time like gold is. So Warren Buffett thinks that gold is kind of worthless. You can't do much with it. It costs you money to store gold, so that's a negative carry trade. Costs you money to store Bitcoin too, and that was one of the early traumas in that market. That Willem said this yesterday, that people get hacked. Their passwords are hacked, and then their Bitcoin is taken. But it's now accepted, and you can get custody arrangements from places like Fidelity. So if somebody takes your Bitcoin, they owe it to you. So I think that was a big thing. But as a concept, it's pretty brilliant. And when you look at the things that do well versus the things that don't do well, the US dollar should be a finite commodity, but we keep printing it like drunken sailors. And so the dollar versus gold since 1971 looks like that. Whereas Picasso's and other iconic things don't do that. They hold their value and increase. Sports teams, we're very involved in sports teams. One of my partners, the lead owner of the LA Dodgers. And when he purchased the Dodgers, everybody thought he was crazy because the price was $2.3 billion or something. Now baseball teams are $8 or $9 billion because there's only one New York Dodgers. I mean, no, there isn't. It used to be the New York Dodgers. It's the LA Dodgers. So that's one of the redeeming features of Bitcoin is that you can't make anymore. So they got that right. Now the question is, what is the utility function of Bitcoin? So if you sadly lived in Venezuela and all of your money was in local currency, you didn't get it out, and that didn't work. Whereas Bitcoin, you could get all of your money out of the country very quickly. Beyond that, the functionality of Bitcoin isn't so high as compared to Ethereum, where you have smart contracts. And it seems to me that will be the next really big thing. Like I said, insurance companies run off of paper transactions. Why isn't that just digitized quickly? And people will soon have their own blockchain. Like, what could be more personal than your own healthcare data? So if you move to Mars on Elon's first habitable flight.
2030?
Yeah, and you say, okay, wait, I want my healthcare records. Like, good luck finding them. They're in paper form somewhere. You probably couldn't even get them. But if you could represent yourself on a blockchain. So, your trillions of cells would be on a blockchain. You can go to Amazon Web Services, put it there, and it's yours. It would take all the computational power in the world just to hack your blockchain. So that's safe, right? And that then goes into property rights. You can indelibly say that this is my farm. You can't steal it, including that terrible story of the the dad trying to register his newborn daughter and couldn't connect with the permitting registry and wherever. Where was that?
They were making mistakes in Colombia. They were making. He went 7 times to register the birth of his daughter, and every time he was registering it, it was always coming out with a mistake.
But then suddenly your daughter's missing, God forbid, and you can't even prove that you have a daughter. I mean, that's savage. And so I think that this is going to be incredibly important for safeguarding that very personal information.
I think there are 2 elements on property rights. One is if everybody were formal and then registering it with blockchain, your property right, that would absolutely secure the fact that nobody can steal it from you. That, of course, assumes that, let's say, 100% of the world is formal. Now, the issue of property rights that I'm usually addressing is the fact that 3/5 of the population, 3 people out of 5, are informal. And that means that they are the result of a faulty system that does not produce proper property rights, like the system that did not produce the correct registration of the birth of the daughter of my friend. Or the system that did not produce the correct registration of a title of an ownership. Or the system that did not produce a correct registration of an intellectual property, of a music right, or of an art right, or of anything like that. In that case, blockchain would work perfectly better if you were to use smart contracts. So you would use smart contracts to tokenize the method that would allow the system to be reformed properly. And of course, I have the golden reform method, which is called the reality check analysis method. So we would tokenize the reality check analysis method, and each country would use this one to actually finally incorporate the informal sector into the formal sector. And once you have 100% of the world in your country formal, then you can completely.
I don't know if everybody understands formal, informal, but I call, learning from Elena, but I call them ghosts. They're just outside the system. And most of the world are squatters. Like, if you're a Chinese farmer, they don't give you land, it's not yours. And so if you have a drought and you have a surplus, they go to war, you know, there's nothing that says that that's yours versus yours. And that's obviously bad. And one of the ideas behind digital currency is that you can own 1/1000th of a Picasso. And the same thing, you could do the same to land. So you have 2 lots, you have 4 lots, but it's all agreed and contracted, and you can't break the contract. So I think it's going to have a profound effect to finally answer your question.
One iteration on that question is, I do remember another technological expert, intellectual geek that came to us a few years ago, trying to suggest that Latin America's lack of property rights, and was hoping to try and implement this in Mexico. For instance, we may have inventories, and very, very valuable inventories. But in order to certify those inventories, well, it's a real hassle, because you have to go with the notary public, and then you have to certify, and then you need an extra observer that validates, right? A third fairness observer that validates that, and you have to hire Deloitte in order to be that third observer, and blah, 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 blah. And so the costs actually surpass. So if you try and obtain a loan, for instance, on capital, which is represented by your inventory, then, well, you're going nowhere, because you have to pay gargantuan interest rates for that. So can blockchain actually help us with inventory? Estoy pensando particularmente, por ejemplo, perdón, el caso que conozco es Electra, ¿no? Pero son cualquier empresa de retail, tienen inventarios muy amplios. Entonces, a ver qué nos dice Todd.
So if I'm a producer of whatever, and I go out to the world and say I'm going to produce agricultural products, and I agree that there are going to be 7 of those boxes that we check. Notary is sort of a crazy concept, but whatever. Like, just we're going to do that per our contract, and every ton of XYZ that we ship, those things have to be there, and they're embedded in the smart contract. And if 5 of 7 are there, all of the computers of that system just won't clear the trade. It's null and void. It's not there. And so, but once done, then you should be able to do huge volumes through it, because you don't have to keep going back, checking every single, I mean, it's just nuts that the way we do things now.
If I may, I think we need to recognize that the power of blockchain is much higher in a country that does not have high amount of regulation, and also in a country that has a more transparent and easy to manage system.
Come again. The power of blockchain?
The power of blockchain is much higher. So the added value of blockchain is exponentially higher in a country that has fewer regulations,
Fewer.
and the system. I mean, if you use blockchain, but you still have to go at every single bit of it, have a notary public sign it, then you kind of like defeat the purpose. You have to like eliminate the concept of all these monopoly interests, which means that you need to have a visionary leader to want to do this simplification of the process.
Maybe I misunderstood your statement, but I think in countries that are heavily bureaucratized, right, like Haiti, right, it's just living hell. Those countries can reach a global market in a way that they can't now. And the U.S. and Mexico have a lot of bureaucracies, but they should be easier to overcome than some of these complete war-torn, horrible situations, right? And, well, look at Venezuela, right? I mean, it's basically a failed state. Argentina before Malay was a failed state, right? The peso went to 2,000 to 1 against the dollar. That's a failed state, right? So in a failed state, nothing's going to work. But when you can then bind yourself to buyers in XYZ country, and now you have a protocol like a smart contract, that's going to really help those people.
So it sort of cuts both ways, right? I understand the idea that blockchain is going to have a higher impact than what Semyon Jankov would call a flexible regulation country. But hey, it would help. It helps a tremendous amount in countries that also are completely asphyxiated by regulations. Here in Mexico, everybody here in this room can tell you the nightmares that they've had with notarios. And with all due respect to your family members, right? But the fact that and the cost, the transaction cost that involved, it's a monopoly on whether you're legitimate or not, and that's and eventually perhaps blockchain is going to break that.
Yeah, I mean, it could replace it.
Well, but you still need to go through law and eliminate their requirement. You see, that's what we were, remember earlier today in the video podcast we had.
I'm not doubting that.
So if you have a legislative body which is made out of lawyers and notary publics who make sure that they will constantly be there, then you're in trouble. That's why I said you need to have a visionary leader that
Right.
wants to simplify,
Right.
and then
So
you put that.
we want to advocate simple rules for a complex world.
Correct.
But if we have cases like Venezuela, like Argentina, or a lot of the legal morass that we live here in Mexico or in Haiti or in others, there's another side to the story that these new technologies, even in politics, where we've had all these debates about fraud, can blockchain be a technology that actually helps register voto por voto? And there's absolutely no question of how that voto por voto was registered, in whose favor.
Yep.
That transparency would be of enormous value. Though granted, there's a value added if you do have a framework of simple rules for a complex world.
Well, look what Elon is doing with Doge, and he's finding some insane number of people, tens of millions of people who are like over the age of 120 still receiving Social Security benefits. So are they really? They're probably pretty dead. But the system allows for gangster types to go in there and hack that, and they're getting the benefit. But that would absolutely eliminate that sort of thing. So we're not there yet. It's not built to scale, but on a fantasy level, that's where things are going.
So his point is very important. There are two types of things, and I think it's important to recognize them. One is indeed important to simplify government. There's no questions, hands down. If you can eliminate notary publics, please do not quote me. Okay, let's put it like that. If you can make the notary publics voluntary, that's how I eliminated them in Peru. You see, I tried to eliminate them in the beginning, and then I almost lost my life. So then I thought, why don't we just say voluntarios? So if the client the citizen wants to go to a notary public, is willing to go, is able to go. But he is not imposed to go to a notary public. So that is one part, right? So we can work. The second one is within the existing management of the Social Security inventory of the people that are accessing the welfare state or the people that are there, you can definitely use a registry that is completely blockchain and make sure that you don't have, you know, you don't manage 120-year-olds that are getting paid, although they are dead probably 180 years ago.
I mean, just look at the failure of transportation. One of the most unpleasant moments is when you go through the security line at an airport. Someone's yelling at you, everything. It's just like, it's barbaric technology, right? Just do an eye scan or whatever it is and be done with it. It's absolutely such a failure of technology. So that'll change.
Well, Todd is traveling tomorrow. He's going to find out he's got to stand up like this in order to go through the airport.
Are you saying I'm fat?
No. No.
You heard
We have two more questions before we open it up to the public, and one that I'm particularly eager for you to share with the students. But one is in trends in global finance, and I think this is a very important message. Not that it's easy, but you claim that the tricky part is not to raise capital. If you have the right conditions, you can raise a bunch of capital if you have the right conditions. Can you explain that?
Yeah,
What is
so-
it that you mean
Well-
when you say this?
When you think of venture capital, I assume everybody has at least some notion of what that is. We were with some venture capitalists last night. In many cases, those ideas are pre-revenue, right? And so you're a great entrepreneur, you have a great idea, you're pre-revenue, you need some mentoring and some capital to get going, and so an angel round, a seed round, and then you get your way to Series A, B, C, D, and so on. That is hard. And if you have a really good idea, like a really, really good idea, the 4 or 5 venture capital firms in Palo Alto, it's going to end up in one of those firms very quickly, if it's that good an idea. If it's a good idea and it's locally and everybody can see that, like, let's get rid of the notary so I can buy sneakers and we'll just put it on a smart contract, I think people would say, that's simple, I get that one, so that's good. As you get to scale capital, which is more what I'm talking about, if you have the wherewithal to invest, say, in a solar field or develop a solar field, the capital is out there and it can't wait to find you, because the solar field has a contract with the local province or local federal government, and their revenue is guaranteed. They get a fixed rate, right? And so once you have that fixed rate and you examine the credit of whoever's paying you that fixed rate, let's just say locally you might make 8%, I don't know what it is, but 10% by the federal government. I believe your government bonds are higher yielding than that, so that would be a tough sale because you're only getting 8% on solar and you can go buy a government bond at 13. But when that reverses itself and you're getting 13 on solar but local government bonds are 8, it's a law of nature. That's where it becomes just a commodity. You will get that capital, and in huge size. So that becomes the commodity. It's the hustle, the permitting, dealing with the notary, dealing with all the local permitting and bureaucracy. That's the hard part. Getting that done, the capital will be there.
So very quick question, because we really would like to hear from the rest of the audience here, but could you tell all our community why you think this place is so cool? You already mentioned it, but please do it again.
Well, I wish I had one of these. I'm 64. I left school after 2 years. I said that my teachers were a bunch of communists, and that was before they were so obviously becoming communists. So, I'm kind of thinking of, applying for a student body. I didn't, I would be a junior. Got 2 years of it. So, I mean, it's amazing. And, you know, the collegiality, the bonding between Mr. Salinas, the vision of the school, the professors, and helping people get to a meaningful outcome for life, as opposed to, you know, becoming having a master's in transgender philosophy. Like, I can tell you, there's no market for that. There's no value in economics assigned to that. So it's amazing. I think what you're doing, it couldn't be more timely too with AI. AI is going to basically call out everything, right? It's fluff, it's good, it's bad, it's whatever. And so it's really important to have these skills, and the camaraderie and the fellowship that you have is amazing. It's the only place I know that exists anywhere like that.
How about that, huh? Aplauso. Elena, quick reaction?
Well, I will second that, and I will repeat a bit of what I said earlier. Being myself a female entrepreneur, also, I look very much like you guys, black hair, accent when I speak English, and want to be an international leader working around the world and not just in my mother country, Greece. It's you know, sometimes you don't sleep easily at night, you know? You kind of like say, well, do I really want to do this? And I think you guys have created an extraordinary organization, and Ricardo has done a very good investment, because Ricardo has understood that the most important part of this country is human capital. And of course, I'm an economist, as I said to you, as well as many other things. And I'm dead tired to hear economists talking about how important is human capital, but doing absolutely nothing to really make sure that human capital will develop itself into a, you know, very important asset. And I think this is an extraordinary place that does invest in you. And you learn how you have to invest in yourselves and in your neighbor. And you also learn, which I understand very well from the collegiality that you all have, that it's not really competition. There are two words in Greek, competition. There are two words that mean competition in English. But one is the, you know, the red competition, you know, how to get your blood. And the other one is the blue ocean competition, which is I'm innovating and I'm coming out, creating a new space. And that's where an entrepreneur is really flourishing. And that's where all the beauty of the entrepreneurship is, and all the scary area is, because you're alone and you're kind of like, somebody taught me about the blue ocean strategies, but they didn't tell me I'm going to be alone for like all this time. And am I in the 9 people that are going to fail, or am I in the 1 person that I'm going to make it, or am I going to be again? So all this questioning is happening in an extremely beautiful and very safe ecosystem, and this is the University of Libertad.
I want to add one thing on the 9 out of 10 failed. So don't think about failure. Think about the purity of winning, right? So you hear this from golfers who become crazy. I love golf.
We have a golf club that we just opened.
Oh,
by the
good.
way, here.
And people like Phil Mickelson, right? He's a magician, and he says, you know, I hate losing, so it propels me to win. Well, that means you're propelled by a negative, right? And whereas Jack Nicklaus is the greatest golfer of all time, I actually am personal friends with him and his family, he doesn't remember his losses. But he'll tell you exactly, you know, what club he hit on the 15th to win, you know, Augusta National for the 6th time in 1986. It's just a statistic of playing. I've lost many times in business, but you get up, you do the Elon thing, you go, wow, I learned, and you keep going. The other thing, so just think of the positive side of winning and how fun that is. Forget the rest. Don't take all your money and put it into one bet so that you can have 9 wins, and then so that would be bad. But anyway, but one of the biggest assets you have, and I've seen this firsthand, is each other as a network as you go. And so we hired a woman, early days Guggenheim, who was the Baker Scholar, who was number one in their class, and a very dynamic, smart person. She said that 75% of her graduating Harvard Business School class were in touch with each other 3 and 4 times a day. So they scattered, they're hearing deal flow, they need capital, can you introduce me, da-da-da. And now just imagine 10 years of this, right? That's a very powerful network. So honor each other.
Actually, this is one of the amazing assets that MBA schools have, right, in America.
But some really hang together. I've noticed some do, some less so, but HBS is like,
Yeah, and these guys do, and I encourage you to do. I mean, you do the
course.
same, yeah.
it's probably the biggest,
Well,
most
on that-
powerful asset you have right here.
On that note, why don't we start a conversation between everybody over there and us? So, several questions. ¿Cómo le hacemos, Irma? No, bueno, a ver, tenemos Santi. Todos van a tener chance. Bueno, que Ana
Hi.
Mayen decida, entonces.
Hi, Todd. So, how do you imagine debt in Bitcoin? So, if you receive an injection of capital in your startup, how are you going to take that loan, that amount of equity if an investor invests in you?
Sorry, I didn't catch the same question.
So, if somebody provides an investment in your startup, if that's on Bitcoin, how do you imagine debt on Bitcoin?
Debt?
Debt rather on fiat. Debt, deuda.
So when you think of debt, that tends to be a thing of more mature companies that are producing revenue rather than a startup, right? And so you can have debt with warrants if you have a lot of intellectual property. Somebody might say, you know, here's $10 million and I get free warrants to buy 20% of the company, but you're betting all of the IP of your company on the execution. So debt for startups is a thinner market, harder to get, and better when you're more mature and you have cash flow to service that debt, because obviously you have to pay that. So having Bitcoin as your equity might be okay, but you know, if you needed that $10 million, right, and you got 10 million in Bitcoin, I haven't looked lately, but I believe it's down about 18%. So you have to factor that in too, right? And very hard to hedge Bitcoin. So those two things. Now, startups do get funded because the world, the entrepreneurs in ETH and Bitcoin have big gains. It's a lot of money, $3+ trillion. So they're happy to bet some ETH, but you may need to pay salaries, so you need to convert it into dollars or whatever. But debt and startup, not the best combination, really. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I mean, you could do it, but like,
The real question is how are you going to measure the amount of capital that the investor provided if he's investing on Bitcoin into your company? If he's buying a share of equity using Bitcoin rather than fiat?
yeah. Oh, you mean so you have to have a moment in time, right? So let's just use a round number of 100,000 for Bitcoin. If you agree that that was 100,000, I probably would say it's worth 97 or something because you have conversion cost. So now you got 100,000. If it went to 200,000, good on you. But if it went to 50,000, you probably don't care because you converted to a fiat currency, right? Is that what you're saying? That how do you agree on that value?
Yeah,
Because it's a snapshot, right? Because it changes all the time.
that's the thing. The snapshot.
It's a snapshot in time. But that should be part of your contract to say, I invested, what we agreed was $100,000. You took it in Bitcoin. What you did with it is up to you, but you told me you wanted to convert it to pesos so you can pay your employees. but I gave 100,000. And that equals blank % of the company.
I can hear you. So my question. Bueno, hola. Hola? Okay, perfect.
There you go.
So my question is, imagine I was sitting in front of you and I wanted you to invest in my project. I have an amazing project, but besides that, what would be the thing you would see that would say, yes, I want to invest in you? Like, what are the things that you see when someone wants capital from you?
Great question. Pure sort of finance geeks and some probably even venture capital people would focus in the supermajority on the quality of the concept. I have a friend who's a very famous sort of venture guy. He doesn't run a venture fund. It's really his own money. He spends weeks in psychological discussions with you. He wants to know the person. And he taught me a lot because I was the college dropout and so on. And he said, just being smart is one thing. Being good at math is one thing. How you dress, who your social network is, how you communicate, how you love, is your empathy. Like, he measures all this stuff. And then as an investor in the entrepreneur, he wants to find the weak spots so that you can admit to each other, those are my weak spots. I have many, so it's easy to get there, like accounting, bad, and just say, okay, so we're bad at that because he's going to invest. So how are we going to fill those holes? So I think being incredibly forthright and understanding who you are, what your strengths are, and what your weaknesses are, will almost inevitably separate you from the 20 other people who walked in that room for capital that day, because people are like, yeah, I'm great at everything. Not really. You can't really be good at everything. So I think that introspective analysis is really important. And then it's the quality of the idea. Assuming those two check out, then you've probably figured out that your idea is great and you're great, so now you have a very high valuation. So now we got to talk about that. Like, do I want to get in at 100 or 8? So I'd say those are kind of the components, and the more articulate and forthright and honest you are, the more dangerous that is, because very few people are.
Can I add to it? I would like to know your full understanding of the risk of your project, and whether or not you have understood it, and whether or not, having understood that, what have been the mitigating measures you have thought of. Because everybody has a great idea, and everybody can present it super greatly. But I care to know whether or not you know how to handle possible problems.
That's a good point. And if there's a known sort of downside that you can point to, obviously, all the better. But
And I may add to what Todd said, like your emotional integrity. It is understood by me once I hear from you all the risks you're able to outline. Because if you're very egocentric, your risks will be very few.
Yep.
And you will be, oh, and I know how to handle this and this and this and this and this and this. And I'm the daughter of that guy who has given me all this power.
Yep.
And that reduces you to absolutely not a target I would like to be associated with.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, Todd and Elena. It's been an honor to listen all this wisdom. And the question that I have for you both is something on the value side. As leaders, what principles are non-negotiable in your work to make great things happen?
So say that again?
What principles are non-negotiable?
What principles
What
are
principles?
non-negotiable in your work as leaders to make great things happen?
That's a good question.
No, I think ethics, honesty, forthrightness. I mean, it is the number one most complicated risk asset in any transaction, even at big, highly scalable levels, is the human capital risk. Because what you see may not be the whole picture. And it is astounding how many people will lie, cheat, and cajole to get into a transaction, and they're like, wait a minute, you can't do that. Oh, well, you believe me. You know, so real integrity, real honesty, great communication skills is everything. But so that's, yeah. If you don't feel good about that, that's a non-starter.
Elena, you can also mention that in the context of your work on trust.
Yes, so I am a triple bottom line entrepreneur. So I care a lot to know exactly how Todd presented your integral, your 360, right? So I actually care to see how you treat your taxi driver. I care to see whether you will be, how you're treating your mother. I care to see how you treat your kid. Because frankly, there are plenty of places one can put $1, and I don't care to give $1 to somebody who's not a good person. Because in the end of the day, I also need to sleep at night and know that, you know, I've had a 18 hours of you know, productive day.
If you haven't read the annual reports of Warren Buffett, I highly recommend it. Berkshire Hathaway, I've read them for more years than I care to count, but you can get my version of a PhD in finance by reading all of them, and which I have. For $2.99, you can get all of them. But he is, in sort of a corny Midwestern way, super honest, super open, and very folksy and funny about it, right? So you know what you have with this man. He's not trying to, and to maybe even to a fault. He goes so far to make sure that you really understand. That's huge.
Una más. That's why.
You can come down after it, don't worry.
Hi. Well, you said that my classmates are the most important assets we have in this university, and I agree, and I love it. But I think that here in this university happens a positive, but a problem, not a problem, but a situation. How do we, as sharks and persons with very strong personalities, can collaborate without
Beating each other up?
without
Confrontation?
without friction, and as the most successful way?
What do you mean friction?
Because lots of people here have a very strong personality, and maybe can be a problem when we collaborate.
Well, I think Todd and I have very strong personalities. So does Roberto.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Oh no, you're not a strong personality, Roberto. We're walking all over you. Yeah. So your question is, how can you communicate with others?
Yes. What kind of strategies to follow and to pursue it when you're?
Okay. So may I take the? Can I ask for answer?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So your question sounds to me like, how do I learn how to hold a fork and a knife and meat, satisfy my, fulfill my hunger, and at the same time be proper in the way I eat so others don't look, you know, and also not be sloppy and so on. Yeah. So you have to learn by doing. There is no such
Trial
a thing.
and error?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? You may lose some friends, And you're going to have to learn how to say, I'm sorry. And that is actually the most amazing thing in growing up, to say, I'm sorry. And then maybe you learn how to create coalitions. And you're not going to be on your own all the time. That's the most important part for an entrepreneur. And especially somebody who has been told that he's so and she's so bloody smart, right? So I'm not going to do that with another person. I'm going to do it on my own. And then, you fall down and break your yeah. Well, after 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, that's why 9 out of 10. So then you're going to learn. And afterwards, you're going to learn how to produce coalitions.
There's a philosophical side of this too. So your ego wants to say, F you, and so, but your winning side doesn't want to do that. So being non-reactive, sort of a Buddhist idea. Steve Jobs, who's a very confrontational guy, used to, in those moments, he would say, let's go for a walk. And if everybody understood that you're all type A people and that as conflict resolution, let's take a walk. And they would resolve it just walking through the park. It's not perfect, but at least you both decided we're not going to fight, we're going to put our egos aside, and we're going to try to move forward. I always thought that was clever.
But may I say something additional to that? We are living in a world, well, in a way, sometimes I'm really excited that you all are very young and I still wanted to believe I'm young until I see you all. Okay, so I'm really older. But we have kind of rounded all the curves. This generation of yours has rounded all the curves, right? And you cannot, oh, my emotions are hurt because, I had a confrontation with my neighbor. You know what? Too bad. Too bad. You will not grow a personality if your emotions are not going to be hurt, or you're not going to hurt somebody else's emotions. Recognizing that you hurt somebody else's emotions and saying, you know what? I recognize that I was a bitch. I recognize that I was a son of a bitch myself, and I recognize that but you know what? I still do not agree with you, but I'm very sorry about my behavior. Big leaders, guys, were not stars in Instagram. Big leaders, Churchill, can you believe Churchill won the Second World War? Can you imagine Churchill? Today's world, he would wake up in the morning with a big cigar and drinking scotch. He would have never be an Instagram follower or whatever influencer. But today we would all be in a Nazi world.
Yeah, but he would do it with humor, which is another way of
Precisely.
taking the edge off. Like, you're cute when you're angry. Let's go for a walk.
Let's go for a walk. Learn what, create your middle, your middle name. When you say let's go for a walk, that means I'm really pissed off.
Or Benny Hill's version of the Kantian golden rule: do unto others and then run. So I was actually going to say.
One last question, one last comment. And take smart skills.
And expressive clarity.
No, smart skills and leadership in high-performing teams.
And I would also, I want to relate it to the last question. You have a question over here? No. Ya es la última pregunta. But before Matias says, before I forget, and why this is so important, and some of you with your strong personalities and with your drive and whatnot may be puzzled if I want to be an entrepreneur, why the hell do I have to take Historia de las Ideas? Or why the hell do I have to take foundational principles of economics? What Pablo Bullosa teaches is so unbelievably relevant to what Todd and Elena just shared. And that's what you learn by reading Immanuel Kant. That's what you learn by reading the great classical liberals of Mexican turn of the century, of the 18th and 19th century. That's what you learned. That's what you learned by reading Aristotle, by comparing Aristotle to Plato, and by all of these. That sometimes it would be irrelevant even in a Harvard Business School MBA. no, they would never dare to teach Shakespeare or these classics. But we take it very seriously because you learn the value of trust. You learn the value of empathy,
Today, here are some of my students. Today we were reading Tacitus, the Roman historian, who was the first man who realized clearly and who put it in this way that the more laws, the more regulations a political system has, the most corruption it will be.
He anticipated
And,
the bureaucracy. Yeah.
No, and going back to your first theme, the relationship between technology and property rights, the Egyptians developed geometry because they had a problem with property rights. Each year, the Nile sank the lands, so nobody knew after that what belongs to whom. So they needed this technology, geometry. Geometry means measurements of land. That's earth, measurement of earth. So everything is related, and many times to understand any sort of problems, you need to go back to see how it became to come what it is. So you need to make reverse engineering or history or something, but you need to go back to understand the world in which you are standing
Because
today.
it repeats itself. The world repeats itself. And also, you cannot understand, first of all, I don't think you can do anything related to negotiations if you do not read Machiavelli. And then you cannot understand Machiavelli if you don't do game theory. And then you cannot do game theory if you don't understand Machiavelli. So it's like this. Yeah? And then you
Well, we
will
have a
know-
chess club here,
and
so.
you will know very well when, once you do all this, when the time will be for you to take a walk.
Well, we're almost there to take a walk because we're almost out of time. But one more question, Matthias.
So, but before we go walk, I was wondering. We're talking about the advantages that technology can bring to people that want freedom over people that want control, and that always seems to be a double-edged sword. Like there's greater freedom to spread texts. You know, try censoring a text today; it's impossible. But at the same time, there is a surveillance risk. So I'm wondering, as we start using and adopting and putting everything in society sort of through the passageways of these new technologies that make things simpler and more practical for our lives, what may be some of the risks to liberty that may come from that practicality, and how would we mitigate them?
Good question. I mean, we've been living in a censored world, so Elon's purchase of Twitter is probably the most important transaction in the history of humanity, in my opinion. And so, because it opened up the world to discuss anything from COVID to, the genius of Kamala. And so it was really important to have this open forum, right? But one of the pieces of that is keeping governments in check, right? Because spying on your own citizens should be illegal and should be enforced, right? So hopefully that's more respected. It hasn't been, right? And so that was definitely not the idea with our Constitution. We didn't think about texting and email, but like that should be private property. So hopefully that's observed, at least somewhere in the United States. We certainly hope that that's observed. But this open dialogue, you're just telling it like it is, and you shouldn't be canceled. If I don't like your opinion, just don't read it. But they try to cancel people, and that's really sick. So I don't know. I think, but on a privacy level, again, always bet on people your age. You're going to figure out ways to store information that people with gray hair won't figure out. So you'll blockchain your text or something.
Awesome. Well, muchísimas gracias a todos. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Elena. This was a great conversation.